Well, today we are going to be taking a look at the astrology chart of Prince Harry. And specifically, today we're going to be looking at what are or who are the enemies of Prince Harry that are shown in the astrology chart. Now, there's a few houses and planets that we can look at to determine who's going to be detrimental or perceived to be detrimental in someone's life. So that's what we're going to be analyzing today using astrology. For those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe. By the way, I practice Vedic sidereal astrology, which is the astrology from ancient India. I do use some of my own interpretations, though, so just be aware of that. If you're interested in a personal private reading, check down below for details. And also, I just want to point out that this reading is for entertainment purposes only. All statements about Prince Harry or other members of the royal family, well, these are just my interpretations of the astrological energies, and it's my opinion. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to pull up the chart of Prince Harry, and we're going to be looking at things like the sixth house. And what's really surprising is, a lot of people might think, for example, maybe his father, he has a difficult relationship with his father ever since he left his royal duties and he ended up moving to Montecito or Santa Barbara. But you'll actually see in the astrology chart, his father's not really considered an enemy. And we're going to see that. And I'll show you that right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at that astrology chart. I was actually interested at looking at too. I was interested at seeing, okay, what is his relationship with, for example, King Charles? If you notice in Prince Harry's chart, remember Sun and the ninth house, that represents father. And something to point out is, first of all, Sun is in its own sign of Leo, which makes it really it's in a really good sign. It also tends to be when it's in the ninth house, it could show a father that's considered a teacher, a father that's considered very fortunate, a father that gives you a lot of values, a lot of teachings. So it's actually pretty good when we look at it. When we look at the Saturn aspects, and I'm numbering the houses from Saturn just to show you where those houses are going or where the aspects are going. You see that Saturn is not aspecting the ninth house. And then even if we look at Mars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. We got that aspect there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have the aspect here. Even with those aspects from Mars, it's not aspecting the ninth house. So that's interesting. So from Prince Harry's point of view in his chart, the relationship with the father, if anything, he's probably more worried about disappointing his father. It doesn't show that there's a bad relationship there per se. Now, from Prince Harry's point of view, so definitely, I would say it shows that he cares about his father. That there's actually a lot of attachment there for the father. What we're gonna see is that the problematic people in his life, well, a couple of them, you probably are guessing it. So let's talk about that. First of all, I want to talk about his older brother, Prince William. And when we're looking at an astrology chart, when we're looking at siblings, what we look at is either the third house over here, or we look at the 11th house. Now, the third house over here, it can represent siblings, but in a very general way. And it usually refers to younger siblings, usually. But if there's no planets in the 11th house, you can kind of go and see, okay, what's in the third house. But the 11th house, which is over here, this represents older sibling. So if you have an elder sibling, that's represented by the 11th house or elder siblings, okay? And his elder sibling, Prince William, is going to be the 11th house over here. And you notice that Saturn is there. Saturn's in the 11th house. Saturn represents difficult energy, stuck energy, judgmental energy. So one of his core karmic relationships in this lifetime is his relationship with Prince William. And what's so difficult about this particular placement is it kind of, when we ever have Saturn influencing our relationships, it's almost like the situation never gets fully remedied. It never really gets fully taken care of. It's interesting in that way. It doesn't ever fully resolve itself. The only way that you can ever kind of fix a Saturn situation like that is to gain some sort of neutrality towards it, or kind of a state of acceptance. So, for example, he might feel very judged from his older brother. He might feel like his older brother is always too serious, always too about decorum, because Saturn's all about tradition, decorum, following the rules, So typically, Saturn represents like a feeling of someone's very judgmental. Now, a lot of people on the outside, they might be saying, well, sure, Prince William has every right. Look, Prince Prince Harry essentially walked away from the family. And I understand that the chart is basically, if you think about it, Prince Harry's point of view. So Prince Harry's point of view is he might feel like his brother's being unfair. He might feel like he's being judged too harshly there. So that's something to point out there. The other thing to bring up in the astrology chart is if we look at the 11th Lord, which is Venus, because it's the sign of Libra, you'll notice that Venus is debilitated in the sign of Virgo. So that's another issue here. And I'm clicking something on my screen. It's debilitated in the sign of Virgo, which again could show it's kind of negatively affecting the relationship. Also, the fact that it's in Virgo could show a sibling that's very critical, highly critical. Now, what's really interesting about Venus in Prince Harry's chart is it not only represents, because it's the 11th Lord, it can represent Prince William in some ways. It also is going to represent his first spouse. So we actually can kind of get a double meaning there because of lordship there. Remember, when we're looking at relationships in Vedic astrology, usually there's a planet that represents, and then there's a house that can represent. So when we're looking at, when we're looking at the spouse in the astrology chart, we would be looking at the seventh house over here, and then we would be looking at planet Venus or Jupiter. So that's interesting to point out there. So again, let's take this over to his relationship with his wife, Meghan Markle. And you'll see, because Venus is debilitated here, in fact, it could be his relationship to women in general, since Venus represents like womankind essentially, and especially in a masculine chart. Uh, so it could show his relationship in love and romance is weak. Okay, so it could be a really difficult energy there, experience there with Venus being in the sign of Virgo. Love and romance may have always been an issue, maybe even before Meghan. Love and romance was an issue because it's weak there in the sign of Virgo. But then it shows for his spouse, because spouse also takes on the characteristics of Venus, is a critical spouse. So it could be like a spouse that's really nitpicky, a spouse that's really, always like focused on. Sorry, I had an itch on top of my head. Um, a spouse that's always focused on like details, nitpicking, and so it could be judgmental, critical. All those things could be, Venus in the sign of Virgo, especially debilitated. Debilitated could show like it's a very low vibrational energy. So let's put it that way. Now, the other thing to point out is we got the seventh house to look at the relationship with the spouse. Okay, so the relationship with the spouse. Well, the thing about it is when Mars is in the 12th house, we got Kuja dosha. So that, and let me tell you, so Mars aspects are the strongest aspects are going to be the fourth and eighth aspect. So Mars is going to be aspecting this house, and it's going to be aspecting the eighth house over here. It also does aspect this sixth house over here, but it's a weaker aspect than the fourth and the eighth aspect. So the Kuja dosha shows a relationship where there could be a lot of tension. It just represents basically, and let me write that down for you all, especially any of you that are new for watching my videos. Kuja dosha is basically too much Mars energy in a relationship. It's not a blemish that's going to totally ruin the marriage. It is in like 33% of all charts, because one third of all charts are going to have Mars aspecting the seventh house. Okay, so it's not like this horrible, it's going to some bad omen that it's going to end in divorce per se. But if the energy goes unchecked and it goes unrecognized and it's not conscious, it could lead to something like a breakup or separation if left on a very unconscious level. But at the very least, it can represent bickering, not getting along, those kind of things. Um, and the thing is, there's just too much Mars energy. Okay, too much Mars energy, and that can equal butting heads, not getting along. Restlessness and anxiousness also could be representative there. The other thing I want to talk about, if we're talking about what's perceived to be enemies. Now, I also want to kind of clarify, what do we mean by enemies? Okay. Enemies is just anyone that either is against you emotionally, maybe financially, maybe at work, career. So anyone that's kind of like against your interest, against your self-interest, even if it's emotional, someone puts you down and they're an emotional enemy. That's what we're going to be looking at right now. Who's the emotional enemies? Because the emotional enemies, we see that some of the enemies can be indicated with Saturn and Mars, the Kuja dosha. Now, I do want to clarify too, it's not that Meghan Markle is an enemy. It's that there's difficult. So I'd like to maybe say difficult people in the astrology chart would be more appropriate. So difficult people as perceived in the astrology chart. So let's go and talk about 6 from moon. So if we look at the moon and we count 6 houses from moon, that gives us kind of the emotional conflicts. And look, voila, we got 6 from moon. We got Venus there, which is spouse. It also can represent older sibling, remember, because it rules the 11th house. Okay, so the people that are causing the most emotional upset in the life, because that's 6 houses from moon, is going to be like spouse, elder sibling, because it rules the 11th house, but also the 10th house. That's kind of interesting. 10th house and sign of Virgo. So that's kind of interesting. So the Virgo, what I think about with Virgo is criticism from the media. So Virgo represents criticism, nitpicking, investigative reporting, journalist, all those kind of things. And remember, he had those cases with some of those like publications or those newspapers that were going on. Well, that's going to continue to be a sore spot, is the media and the nitpicking and the journalists and things, because it's the sign of Virgo. The 10th house has to do with actually public responsibility. So it could really be the royal duties, that public responsibility kind of being in the front and center in the media spotlight, because 10th house has to do with public visibility. It might be actually really emotionally costly for Prince Harry from his point of view. It might be hard. He might not like it because he feels like he gets criticized too much. So that's part of the issue there too. So these are just a quick example. We went through a few points of some emotionally difficult relationships in the chart. Now, the other relationship that I didn't really spend too much time looking at it would be the relationship with his mother. But remember, he was very young with that relationship. And so we do have the Saturn aspect. And I don't think we have the Mars aspect to the mother. No, we don't. So we had the Saturn aspect to the moon, which it remember represents mother. But I was actually, there's several different interpretations for that. Saturn can represent, for example, somebody a long separation. And so the interpretation there could be, his mother, Princess Diana, she left us at a very young age. So it was kind of like, it's a sore spot. There's that Saturn karma. He essentially didn't grow up with a mother most of his life. I mean, there were other people that maybe took on the role, but Princess Diana. So that could be the interpretation there with Saturn, because Saturn can represent something being taken away, isolation, separation. So that's what it can represent also. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. And also let me know if there's any other videos where you want me to look at like important relationships within the astrology chart. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.